Welcome to Numbers Therapy, episode 30. Today's episode titled Life in Perspective. First off, for the U.S. folks, happy Thanksgiving, of course. We were off for last week, so really excited to be back in it. For the World Cup folks, thank you for joining us, despite the fact that the World Cup's on in the background. I may or may not also have it on in the background while this is happening, so appreciate that too. Today's episode, it's not often we get time to be able to pull back all the way from like a wider philosophical standpoint, right? Usually we're in the midst of like hustling, emitting, flipping, all that good stuff, whatever version of it is that we do. But in this market right now, obviously a little bit quieter. And so therefore we have like a pretty excellent opportunity to go wider here and think through and apply wider philosophical lessons to what we do within Web. So I think today's episode is really going to be a really good example of that. A couple housekeeping points before we dive in. So we're on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts. You can catch all the episodes there in case you've missed them. Do want to continue to hear feedback from the NVHQ crew. If anybody has feedback on anything that they want to see more of, any topics they want covered, I don't know, things you like, things you don't like, whatever it is, feel free to reach out. And lastly, we still have an application out there, floating out there for being a guest on Numbers Therapy as well.
Wow.
Both.
What a fucking wow.
We allow lists to both guests and to the people that are referring the guest as well. So yeah, if you have anybody who you think would be an excellent guest on Numbers Therapy, either from inside MVHQ or even outside too, as we're expanding beyond at this point, feel free to reach out or submit the form. So for frame purposes, the purpose of Numbers Therapy to talk through the macro and oftentimes showcase our in-house MVHQ experts like today. New news is we're going to be expanding beyond, as I just mentioned, is we're going to try to keep expanding and seeing different thought that kind of exists out there and get different perspectives to build on top of the foundation we've already built. And more specifically, ensure everyone understands how all the big pieces fit together, help everyone make better decisions with NFTs and other investments using a balanced perspective, learn about different areas and opportunities that exist out there and different ways of thinking, and when possible, showcase our folks in here and get their background and perspectives. And this will continue to evolve, but I think you'll really see today's a different flavor of an episode. I think it's going to be pretty excellent. Also, for anybody listening live and even recorded, just want to call out, like always, there are different levels that are in here. So it's really important that everyone is along for the ride as we go through. So if you have any questions at all, words, definitions, acronyms, or if it's more advanced, please drop them in. We have two chats going. Chat, you can chat or make fun of us or whatever you want to do, and drop memes. And then guest questions, which is guest questions, exactly like it sounds. That's where you can drop your questions into. Lastly, important note and disclaimer, none of what you hear in here is financial advice. It's all opinions. And so, without further ado, and on to today's guest and episode. Today's guest has become a really good friend of mine solely because of here. We've spent too much time together in ARGs and other analysis, though I have a feeling others can probably say the same about him as well. Merged with his Papa presence, he brings wisdom, as in, lessons that he's learned from challenges he's run into throughout his crypto and NFT days and even prior. I think that melded with his analytical and philosophical approach will enable us to spend time on a topic that I feel like we all don't get the chance to spend too much time on, which is the balance of hustling and flexibility versus specialization. Most of us here listening outside are hustlers by nature. That's kind of why we have this, is to analyze macro about how to invest and how to think about projects. We're naturally mostly hustlers by nature. So we look for angles and opportunities, trading, flipping, new businesses. Consequently, we sometimes jump around a little bit. What we're going to work through today is, if that's the right approach, why or why not, and where that line should possibly be drawn. And so it'll be a pretty interesting conversation about maximizing time, efficiency, and consequently money. These days, he hails from Texas with sporadic similar guest appearances on VC from his kids, as I'm sure many of us have seen. Really appreciate having this dude in mine and our lives. Please welcome Seth to the stage, everyone. Seth, how you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you so much, Aslo. It's great to be here. It's funny to be on this side of it, though.
Yeah, I'm thrilled to have you here. It'll be pretty good. So,
me too.
Let's maybe start with some pre-Web3 and Web3 background first. Can you talk about what kinds of things you did, where focus was pre-crypto, pre-NFT land?
Yeah. So I went the college route, took my time. I went to college in California, in the UC system. I was focusing on as a film major at first. Starting in high school around 15, I started making films and entering competitions and doing that, and had a lot of fun. Had some minor success and my name in a couple lights here and there. And then as things started to get serious in college and trying to figure out where I was going to go with the career, I transitioned over towards stuff that I was starting to like and enjoy in my college experience, which was studying history and really gaining perspective on the current world from things that came and happened before. I kind of found myself being a humanist and reading as much as possible and trying to learn from our past. So I decided to move towards like a college professorship in history. And then things advanced from there, and I had a lot of jobs. I was always bouncing around from different things. I opened a pizza restaurant, ran that for a few years. I also did some editing work. After I was done making films, I stayed kind of around the industry and did some editing stuff. I did some things for MTV and some private or some independent filmmakers I did editing work for. And I'd coached a lot of sports, coached high school football, track and field, I was a substitute teacher during that time, all while kind of bouncing in and out of figuring out exactly what I wanted to do. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of experiences that I appreciate, and there's definitely a lot of eyes forward moments that I look back on and say, if I would have maybe stuck with that thing, things would have been different. But from where I am right this second, I am perfectly happy with exactly how things have gone.
Yeah. And I mean, building on top of that as well, first off, I think I probably speak with other people listening right now, listening later, to say we're not surprised that you were at some point going this like professorial route. It kind of seems like very, very fitting. But it sounds like also a lot of what shaped your background was on the personal side too, with parents and otherwise. Can you talk about that a little bit too? Because I think it's going to really tie in well to what we're talking about today. And I have some sense of that background from you and I talking.
Yeah. I come at least economically, a very economic, diverse background. So my dad was a farm worker in this valley in California, and my mom was the daughter of the first executive producer of ABC TV, who also wrote the check to Walt Disney to build Disneyland. So the difference was pretty extreme, going from one family reunion to the other. So with my dad's side, I learned that, money does not matter. Family, seeing each other, being together on holidays is very important. Whereas on my mother's side, there was very few of us. Like my dad came from a huge family. My mom was one of three, but everyone was spaced out from each other and didn't see each other all the time. So I got two different perspectives. I definitely learned about the importance of taking care of your money from one side, and I learned about the importance of not dwelling on your money on the other side. My dad was an artist, musician, played with a lot of big names, including he played with Jimi Hendrix while he was in Germany. He became very good friends with his guitar tech all the way through the end of my dad's life in 2002. He actually went AWOL from the army, which is a pretty amazing story, and ended up getting an honorable discharge and double pay because the army messed up his paperwork. But anyways, and then my mom, she ran away from the money and became a social worker, went to UC Berkeley, and I grew up basically at least once or twice a week spending my nights until 8, 9, 10 o'clock at a community center with her clients, people of all different mental faculties, and they were all adults, and I was like 7, 8 years old playing pool and ping pong with them, and I was too young to judge, so I just learned to have fun with everybody regardless of who they were, and enjoy their company. And I had friends, that were probably in their 50s, 60s, 70s that I look forward to seeing every week as a 7, 8, 9-year-old. And I had an extremely diverse background. My dad, was very close with Hell's Angels, and there's a lot of music. I grew up going to bars, sitting in clubs on stage, on the side of the stage, listening to my dad play with, big names like John Lee Hooker and his daughter. They would play together pretty routinely out in California. And so I was an only child. I have 2 half brothers, but they didn't grow up with me. They're much older. So I was an only child that was raised very much around adults predominantly. So I've always felt more comfortable with people older than me, even more so than people my own age. I do, really well connecting with adults in just about any situation. And I'm an adult. I'm 40, right? But I still think about, myself as being like young compared to everybody else around me. But anyways, there's quite a bit in my background. I started refereeing soccer as a little kid and had a lot of fun with that for many years before kind of moving away from that whole thing. But yeah, my family history is pretty interesting, to say the least.
I feel like, having discussed your family history with you in the past and then hearing it now, right? Like, I feel like 2 things that strike me out of it. 1, your ability to be creative and see like different angles on things and different way of thinking about things. And then 2, of course, is just the patience that you kind of apply. And so like reapplying that back to like our craft of the folks who are listening on here, be it trading, be it investing, be it even projects, right? Developing projects. The concept of like tolerance and patience and projecting what could go wrong even, right? And like the possible outcomes. I've noticed a lot, and I can think of at least one really good example of it, but there's probably more than one. I've noticed a lot that like, as you talked about projects in VC that you're a really big fan of, right? There's been at least 1, maybe 2 instances that it just hasn't panned out that way. The one that comes to mind, I actually don't know that well, but I remember it. I remember the time at least, was when Oxia came up. And I know you were very, very keen on it. And it came out, and I remember it just got, it didn't have the best response. Let's just say that, at least. And then obviously some memes came out of it and all that good stuff. And notice, like, you didn't seem to be overly fazed by that. And it seems like part of the reason of that is you'd maybe projected that was a possible outcome that exists. And you still didn't, swing your reaction and emotion all the way in the other direction. Your reaction to it wasn't, I'm just going to dump right now. I don't believe in the project anymore philosophically. Your reaction was like a bit more measured than that. So, I mean, yeah. You agree that that background, the patience and being able to plan for different scenarios, that was shaped by that background to some extent?
Yeah, I think that this might be, putting lipstick on a pig in a way, but I think I'm really good at rolling with the punches. Yeah. I've had a lot of things come down the pipe. Like my dad, for instance, was diagnosed with hepatitis C probably when I was in 2nd grade, 3rd grade, and it was basically, he had days to live, and he went to at the time, I remember the words coming out of his mouth. He went to a Eastern medicine, but I believe he called it Oriental medicine. And he started acupuncture, and he started bringing home these teas, and these teas would just, make the house smell like something you didn't want your house smelling like. And he would go to the doctor every day and get his blood drawn, and the doctor would tell him, I don't know what's going on, but you seem to be doing a little bit better than yesterday. And that went on for a few weeks, and we got the call. The doctor said, it's not looking good. We're thinking you have less than a couple of days to live. And he gets the call for the transplant in 1990. And he goes in, he gets the transplant, and he lived another 12 years after that. But it was definitely a difficult home where my dad had his own emotional issues and would hold his health over me. Like if I ever made mistakes in the home, it would be like, I could die tomorrow. I could do that. I could be gone, and you're going to regret, being, a jerk to me and all this kind of stuff. But, my brother is like bipolar schizoaffective, and I've been dealing with him for many years. And I think I've just always had a lot around me as far as dealing with things. And yeah, I could have high expectations of something, but it might not pan out. And guess what? Things are still going to be okay, to at least okay, maybe better.
Let's talk about one of these such things that did not pan out exactly as planned. So you, almost more than maybe anybody within the MBHQ community, and certainly even beyond that, were in quite early in crypto. And so it's for all the stories that we've heard of folks that almost got in early to crypto or were like a step away from it or something. I mean, you were actually there and you did something about it. Do you want to talk about that story and how that panned out? Because it's, not the greatest outcome, but super interesting at least. And it's nice hearing the context of dealt with it.
For sure. So I think I bought my first Bitcoin probably at the beginning of November in 2013. I thought it was 2012 before, but I went back and looked at the price.
What was the price? Do you remember the price?
I believe it was $426.
Okay, got it.
And I bought 7 Bitcoin. I went all in with all $3,000 I had saved up to my name, and I didn't know anything about it except for my buddy was using it to buy experimental drugs from China. And I went and read about Bitcoin, and I still have all these articles on my Gmail that I sent to myself. And I have stuff from CNBC and all these people saying, what's wrong with it? And I just read them before this interview, and they literally say the same things that they say to this day. It's pretty funny. But so yeah, I read about it. I didn't spend. I wasn't ordering drugs or buying anything on that website. They got taken down twice, and the guy went to prison. So I just held on to it. But I made the mistake of not only forgetting that I had Bitcoin for a few years, but forgetting my password. Didn't know where my seed phrase was. Didn't have any of that, and the wallets were different back then. Like. It's still the same result, right? If you don't have that information, you're locked out. But I had written down clues to my password, and I ended up finding a guy. His name was like Bitcoin Jake or something on Reddit. And I gave him my clues, and some people had vouched for me, and I gave him my clues, and he figured out my password, and I got my 7 Bitcoin back, and I paid him the 2 Bitcoin that I had agreed up front to pay him if he was able to figure out my password. So I would definitely say that obviously having 7 would have been better, but having 5 and paying him 2 was massively plus EV. Those 5 Bitcoin eventually went on to help pay off the remainder of what I owed on building a home in 2017. So, a few years later and a few Bitcoin less, it's still, delivered what everyone would hope that Bitcoin would deliver if you got in that early. But yeah, just to run back on the Oxia thing, I was devastated by those memes. Oh my God, the hoodie, the sweater. Grape was like the biggest proponent for making sure everybody saw that meme, and I thought it was hilarious. I thought it was terrible art. It was disgusting. But then there was the part of me inside that was just like, oh no. Like, I've been pumping this. I've been pumping the team, and this is what they give us. It was a pretty hilarious moment. But like we're talking about, something, to let roll off the chest and not react too harshly to. To this day, I still have a little bit of belief in that team delivering something at some point in the future that could be representative of the AAA game. I don't know if it's going to happen. As far as I'm concerned, that money is spent. I'm going to hold it and see what happens. But yeah, I'll let you continue on the train of thought.
What was your reaction, by the way, when that happened? Because we're in VC at that point. Everyone knew that you were pretty bullish on it. How do you what was your reaction other than just stay mum at that point in VC?
Yeah, that was my reaction. I definitely didn't say it out loud because I didn't believe it. I definitely did not say it's not that bad. I knew I was like, some of this other stuff's pretty good, but that is in and of itself what people are going to know about this project. This is bad.
At what point
this
do you
is
think?
bad.
At what point is it like, shit? These are my bags, and I'm not thrilled with it. And but then also on top of it, shit, this is also my reputation, like my credibility. That's going to get a little bit here as well. And
For sure.
Does that affect how many big calls and bets you place at public bets?
I think so. Yeah, I think it did affect me that way for a while, maybe even to this day. I've made a few calls like that, and they, Red Village, Oxia, Dreamers. I was on Dreamers before Cole posted about it in his favorite projects, like just because I thought they had such a strong community, not a huge community, but a very strong following going back to their original project, and that just, it was almost as bad as Oxia.
What's interesting about all three of those, though, by the way, right, is that if you're like looking back on it, okay, so maybe like the upside potential didn't get reached yet, at least, right? In like pretty much all three cases, but like the downside was still protected in all three of those, right? They still all have very, very solid communities, and maybe that's what that like your worst
teams too. Yeah. I think they had something worth betting on. They had the teams. Some of them already had communities. We were early in gaming meta. Oxia, was a big endeavor for the early stages of gaming. I mean, looking back, I don't think that they were horrible calls. I just think that they didn't pan out or haven't panned out yet. But there's like some other things I've been pretty, like just recently, a couple things that I've been pretty bullish on were like Stoics by Gabe Weiss. I think those have been a very successful mint if you were in early and got a hold of them. I think they're still holding a pretty good floor around 0.1, 0.18 or so. And I think it was like a 0.069 mint or something like that. But there's a lot of price difference between rarities and styles. So you could actually, if you minted 10 of them, you could have probably an average exit of like 0.3, 0.4. So, and that one I'm proud of. I'm going to be holding that for a while because I've always been a supporter of Gabe since his earliest days. But yeah, go ahead and continue.
Yeah, I mean, I think something you're saying in there segues in pretty well. When you started off, not the BTC point of your crypto side of things, but when you started off in crypto, can you talk to like what your strategy was and what your thought process is? Because you and I have discussed it a bit, and I think it's worth talking about, as it applies to crypto and beyond. But yeah, what was your initial thought in terms of tokens within crypto? How did you approach it?
Yeah, so I was pretty much a BTC maxi for a long time, up until probably 2019 when I got sucked into crypto YouTube. But I wasn't bouncing around all these different channels. I followed George from Cryptos R Us, and I tend to believe people and listen to people that are fairly conservative when it comes to choosing coins and how to invest their money. So he's like a DCA maxi, never trying to catch a top and always trying to hold and buy more for the long haul. And we're talking, 5 to 10 plus years, and letting that, and in that time you figure out what this investment and this hold has done for you. You're not worrying about, the ups and downs. And so I found myself in that YouTube, and then I joined his Patreon, and then I joined his Discord, and then I started listening to a lot of stuff. And then all of a sudden my like Bitcoin maxi mentality went out the window, and all of a sudden I'm sitting here buying bags of every single coin you can imagine just before that small bear off in 2019 2020, and all of a sudden I'm holding like 100 different coins that are all down 50-60%, and I'm holding a lot less Bitcoin than I ever would have wanted to hold. And I definitely found myself in a very similar position than I found myself in the last year with all my NFT bags, actually, if I think about it. But I believe in crypto. I believe in just believe in it, like from a fundamental philosophical standpoint. I've always had this idea that, this dystopian future where governments are just overstepping quite a bit. I'm not necessarily a libertarian. I'm definitely not a conservative. I'm mostly kind of a progressive, but I do believe that governments gain too much power, and crypto has the ability to at least circumvent part of that, to give my my earnings and my finances the ability to speak for themselves exactly how I want to use it, without like future social credits coming into play or anything like that. But so I believe in crypto. I'm not worried about getting in and out between crypto and fiat. I'm not afraid of bear markets. I'm not afraid of my portfolio decreasing in size, as long as I'm increasing my token holdings when it comes to Bitcoin and Ethereum. So I'm definitely like, there's not a lot of fear. There's a lot of risk taking, I guess, but I feel okay trying things, taking stabs. Good. It does need to be balanced. I do get extreme. I had some really good conversations with Rekka about my bags and my portfolio, and it definitely got me to streamline. The same as NFTs with like JJ, Avalon, and Isis, and Jinzo, of different people in MVHQ that have just either having direct conversations or listening to their opinions, is helped me balance like kind of my intense reach, like trying to figure things out and find things. I was never a shitcoin person where I was like buying the worst stuff. I was always buying stuff with fundamentals. But you can't monitor everything. And same with NFTs, same with anything you try to do in life. You have to, even if you're going to be widespread on casting a net, it still has to be manageable.
Yeah. So then what was your thought process originally? Why go to 30, 50, 100 coins? Was it because you believed in all of them and you think they're all solid, and therefore you just like diversified your portfolio? Like what was the reason why you did that as the initial approach? By the way, there's nothing wrong with it. I mean, I've done the same thing myself.
No, I think it was some just excitement, and I think just learning about a project I confused with the project being decent. You know what I mean? Like your personal, like you're like, oh, I'm here, I'm present, this must be relevant. And it probably wasn't it just probably wasn't great fundamental analysis. And it could have just been it could have been good fundamental analysis without taking the time and place of the market into account enough. I think most of it was just excitement, eagerness. I don't think I was trying to hit moon bags, because I wasn't buying the things that were being talked about the loudest. I was buying things like helium really early on. I was buying, and some other, like Audius, like things that had good dApps, that had good alternatives to things that were already functioning in the real world, in Web 2. And that was kind of my litmus test, was that, is this, I believe in Web 3, I believe in decentralization. Is this something that already exists in Web 2 that could succeed in Web 3? And so that was kind of what I was looking for.
That's a good lens. I mean, by way of contrast, so I also, like you, initially purchased tons of different coins and tokens. And I actually was buying them because I thought they were all fundamentally solid, and I didn't want to miss out on the 100x, right? Like that was the thought process behind it. I didn't know which one it was going to be. Only then, of course, realized that the market's somewhat correlated, doesn't quite function like that, all that good stuff, right?
Right.
And that's for fungible tokens, right? So even, I mean, I guess the point is what you learned is, like I did, right? Even for fungible tokens, having 20, 30, 50 different things is almost unmanageable. Like it's even if you made it a full-time thing, being able to keep track of what's going on, as well as both fundamentally, technically, if that's your thing, like extremely hard. And like to draw a parallel, right, to a pretty famous person, the Buffett way of thinking always, whether you like him or not, has been, you only have to make so many bets in your life, right? So wait. It's an absolute no until it's a yes. and then fire away kind of a thing, right?
Yep,
And you can see
definitely.
really, really, again, like I've made this mistake many times before, and I'm sure others have as well. You can see as we like pull back here really quickly how that's probably a far smarter way to do it, where you can really, really study a handful of projects, wait for the perfect time, and then just go aggressively and rip it when you think it's really, really asymmetric and there's a tremendous opportunity that exists, and just go for it.
100%.
Yeah. So obviously, even for fungibles, right, to be able to manage 30 or 50 is extremely hard. So, I mean, what about if you even go into NFTs as well, right? Where it's not just about like the project and the subtlety that exists there and the things that you can't perfectly quantify and figure out if it, what the outcome is going to be. But then on top of it, you're dealing with attributes, you're dealing with not as good of liquidity, of course, compared to fungible tokens, right? Where they're on exchanges and they're all the same, of course. So I feel like it becomes that much more complex as a result of that. And what's your feeling looking back at like the last year and a half? Would you have changed your strategy as it relates to investing in NFT projects and gone heavier into fewer projects if you can go back?
I think I would have, but I can't really speak to what my financial situation was. Because of that stretching myself thin, I was never able. I was basically flipping one project to the next enough to get into the next project while still holding a bag or two from the previous one, which eventually stacked up into quite a few bags. But it's really hard to say. Like, I haven't done the math on if I would have exited everything early and just kept minting as many as I could of the next project and then selling them all versus the big hits that I did have from holding. It's so hard to break that down to understand it. Like, you see how Sneaky functioned, and you got to imagine that strategy worked to an extent up until a point, right? And yeah. I don't know. I just don't know if I would have done it. If I would have done it differently, if I would do it differently next time is a different question, because I understand, the volatility in the market. But at the time, I was very swayed by not so much roadmaps, but by community and by momentum of projects on social media, on Twitter and in MVHQ and I think I let my emotions often get the best of me when it comes to my investments, which is something that I have definitely learned to curtail over the last year of being in MVHQ, and I could see it in my trading today, being back into crypto and less in NFTs. So it's hard to say what I would have rather have done differently in the past, because I feel like you can't keep everything, right? You can't keep, if your portfolio one day says $3 million, emotionally, are you going to sell it all that day? Because that's not what got me there in the first place. What got me there in the first place was holding stuff into that super bullish market, right? So yeah, I don't know. It's a very difficult question to kind of look back and try to answer in the present.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I mean, we have a great opportunity now also to maybe look back at some specific projects. So do you want to maybe list off and rip through some specific projects that you were keen on, you invested in, maybe like what some lessons were from those projects? 'Cause I feel like it's really time to think through that and then plan for the near future too as well.
Yeah, definitely.
So yeah, where do you think is worth starting here? So I know Cool Cats was something that's always been in your mind, lots of lessons there on your side. A couple of the others that we've talked about. What do you think is a good place to start here? Project.
I mean, interesting enough, the projects that I love the most, I actually did sell at peaks. Like, I sold a Cool Cat for 28 ETH. I sold an Azuki for 29 ETH. I sold 4 of my 5 mutants, like, in the height of it. So it's kind of interesting, like, looking back, that I actually did successfully trade those and didn't hold bags on them. The things I did hold are Neo Tokyos. I'm gonna check our chat really quick and see if one of our friends is in here, but he's not. But I sold one of my Neo Tokyos to a friend of ours for S2 for 9.5 ETH.
That's pretty good.
and I didn't know what was happening. You know, I thought I was hooking him up. I didn't know what was going to happen with that.
And right,
and we both laugh about it to this day. I mean, it's painful. You know, I don't feel bad because the circumstances were not anything I thought I was giving him. You know, I thought I was giving him a nice floor price on an S2 in that moment. But Pixel Vault sticks with me, even though I minted it thinking 3 to 5 years out, 2 to 5 years. You know, I minted it thinking that this was going to be a big, you know, one of the first major AAA metaverse, everything you can imagine. I definitely, I mean, I'm not going to regret, but I definitely feel like that liquidity at the peak of Pixel Vault would have been very nice to be rotating into other projects at the time. Yeah. Whereas Sandbox Lands, I minted knowing that I was going to hold them in 2023 because that's when the final lands will be sold. And the minute I minted them, I told myself, I'm like, these are going to be my stash. And they were my first NFTs. These are going to be what I stash. And as I've been watching the project and participating in their alphas and watching the way that they deliver information, I sold them all. So I got completely out of them. I sold them probably for an average of 1.6 or so. I sold some early for around 3 or 4, and I definitely lost probably $6,000 or $7,000 a piece going from their height to what I sold them for. But you know, I'm still holding all my red villages. I don't know why. I could sell them now, and I'll probably do better now than if I sold them in a week, and I'd do better then than if I sold them in 2 years. So I should probably get rid of those guys. But yeah, looking back on it, like I sold my gutters, all but one. I sold, you know, the mutants I mentioned. I sold all the cool cats, and I bought back in a couple of cool cats at their lows.
Before we keep going, can we talk about one real fast? So sure. With Red Village is like a perfect example. I have a couple of questions I want to hit on, a couple of projects here, but Red Village is an example, right? Given what you said about it, why are you not selling them now? Like, what is the thought process? Is it fool's insurance where you've done all this work on analyzing it, you still think the community is reasonably solid, and if somehow it's shot up, you just feel like a complete idiot? Is that what it is? Is it time efficient?
Yeah, well,
you don't want to spend.
They haven't delivered what made me most bullish about them, which the first iteration of their product is what we have today, which is basically like a Z-Run copy. But this is only the first of 2 or 3 iterations that they're going to be doing. Yeah. And so I am still holding out for their kind of crawler. So they have like a crawler that they're going to be delivering, as well as a social experience. I don't know if you're going to call it a metaverse, but and alongside those is going to be a token. So that is going to be my exit. I think that the opportunity to exit when that is delivered in the next bullish market is better than exiting now. And yeah, it is definitely like some fool's insurance that I think you framed it as, which I agree with. You know, that's the reason for holding lots of bags, right? Is that you could be right eventually, but what does that do for your liquidity right this second? Nothing. But yeah, for Oxia in particular, I do feel like they have a chance to deliver something that is a great experience eventually. Yeah. And the only reason I say that with hesitation is because I'm more thinking about the people listening and whether they believe it. I actually do believe it. I believe they will deliver it. Whether or not it will be financially successful to holders, I mean, nobody knows.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I think I feel like one of the big lessons that came out from the past while with this market that we probably all underestimated is like the number of scenarios of things that could impact any given project, right? So it's not only do you have like the macro stuff, which of course is affecting everything right now, but then you also have like underweighting the likelihood that something could go wrong technologically, that the delivery timeline will be off, that the community has a problem, there's a founder issue that's uncovered. Like as you start to stack up these things, there's like 100 different things that scenarios that could go wrong, all of which would create some fun and not like the good kind of, the good kind of FUD that sometimes works for some projects, but could deliver some FUD to the project. And I feel like that's something, looking back as you and I are talking about this right now, I feel like a lot of us maybe just underestimated the possible outcomes that could exist in a project, and therefore maybe overestimated the upside, or like the likelihood that a project would just continue to keep going, that kind of a thing. What do you think about that?
Yeah, when you were first bringing up the differences and similarities between fungible and non-fungible and how to approach their, particular markets, the first thing I thought about was the pettiness and the number of angles available to FUD a project in NFTs is exponentially greater. You cannot FUD a shitcoin.
Yeah.
Right? It's a meme. And it doesn't matter who the founders are, what their intent is, if they plan on rugging you. Some people might think that that's a funny meme, right? You can't, the amount of FUD that an NFT project can experience and where it can come from and the timing of it, it's enough to devastate you if you are a small wallet with a big bag in one project. It's really hard, and the best way is to not hold major bags in a few number of projects, obviously. But it's definitely a different world, that's for sure. And what we've seen is that, like you said, sometimes FUD works. I don't know, there's been, how many projects have died from FUD? The vast majority. Who would have guessed that Pudgies would have resurrected to the point that they have?
Yeah.
It was a joke to consider. What were they at? Less than 0.1, 0.4 maybe? I don't know. They were at a pretty small number to where we all could have gotten back in pretty heavily. Except, I guess the resurrection theory just wasn't strong enough. But other things are, if the IP is good enough, you look at Azuki, people don't care about the founder because the IP is so good, or the community is good, right? Same with I don't know about Pixel Vault. Pixel Vault's a major bag for a few of us, and the FUD related to founders and supporters is always going to linger, I think, over that project until they deliver something, right? But I kind of forget the specifics of your question, but I was trying to lean into what I was recalling.
It helps. And I feel like, one of the bigger takeaways also to take from this is you contrast fungible versus non-fungibles too, right? Is what your out is, right? The same as a poker perspective, right? Having outs, right? And in this case, the out is how quickly can you dump something reasonably if there's some kind of issue or combination of issues that exist, right? And in fun, you can just rip it, right? You go into exchange and you mass sell, you just dump and that's it, period, end of story, right? Unless it's a very, very sudden thing, you'll be in okay shape. Whereas, of course, in NFTs, that challenge exists, and that's okay that it exists. It doesn't mean NFTs are not amazing, in many cases. Of course, we all don't think that's the case, but rather that some kind of additional risk premium needs to be put on top of them when you're considering this versus, let's say, fungibles, for instance, right? So we have a couple crowd questions coming in. I want to make sure we get to one on Pixel Vault, one of your favorite projects. So Scott goes asking, what's your impression of the team now? Do you think we'll ever get a game? So any thoughts there?
I have to be honest, I pop in there, I get into a regular thing where I'll pop in daily for a few weeks and then I'll forget to go back for a while. And usually by the time I remember to go back, I've seen something on Twitter where I've missed a mint window on something. So I'm not super dialed in. I don't know. I don't even know if they're discussing a game anymore. I don't have a clue. I know they are. I know they're now discussing, they're doing this inhabitants thing, but they've definitely scaled back what they're selling to the community, I think, as far as what we should expect, at least on the first iteration. I think the community is very strong. I would think a lot of people in that community don't even spend a lot of time outside of that community. I think that's kind of a lot of people's MVHQ. I think the team is better now than it was, I would guess. from lack of, you're not hearing a lot of FUD. They are building, they are delivering smaller things along the way. I don't think I have enough information though to comment on how I think it's going to do in the future though.
Yeah. Okay. Another one of our heavier traders in here also, JJP's asking for some insight on your trading strategy, especially lately. So anything you can share in terms of how you're thinking about trading currently? Are you trading currently? Like, where's your head at?
I am doing 0 secondary plays in NFTs. The only thing I've minted lately was Valhalla, and I got out of that in the first 30 minutes or whatever. But as far as trading tokens go, I am watching for daily volume, watching for price fluctuation, trying to learn more and more every single day, practicing not forcing trades just because I'm at my computer and I have time to trade. Spending more time justifying my levels and my chart reading, taking account into the macro market. I'm not committing any large percentage of my long-term equity into it. I'm treating it more as a educational process than a job. As far as money goes, I'm trying to learn from it because my goal is to have enough liquidity set aside to DCA into ETH and Bitcoin over the next 6 months, as I think the price will continue to drop. That's my strategy as far as crypto goes. But I'm staying present in MVHQ, on Twitter, listening to spaces, because you never know in NFTs, regardless of the macro conditions or the crypto market, you never know when something big is going to pop off, and it might be like a Valhalla, it might be something under the radar that goes from a free mint to half an ETH or above. Like, you just don't know. So I think I'm just trying to stay present, keep learning, keep sharpening my skill set as far as trading goes, and just keeping an open mind to what the next evolution of NFTs is going to be, as well as keeping in mind the struggles that are out there in the macro world, the economic world, as far as I need to have money set aside in case things go south. I think it's just maturing and staying present is probably how I'd best describe kind of my approach at the moment.
Do you think moving into the next bull market or like semi-bull market that we have, do you think you're going to wind up inevitably buying and holding 30 different things again, be it fungible tokens, NFTs? Like, do you think you're going to 30? How do you think your strategy is going to change?
No, I've pretty much dialed in myself on a percentage of my portfolio going towards Benjamin Cohen's strategy, which is DCA into Bitcoin and or Ethereum through the accumulation in the first stages of the next run up, and then picking my favorite alts, and I'm going to limit that to less than 5, and transitioning some of chain stuff. But I haven't been scoping them out. I had a bunch, I had a few listed a year and a half ago, but these projects come and go all the time. So whatever is going to be like hot in that sector, I'll probably pick up 1 or 2 of and hold through the next altcoin season. But no, I'm definitely trying to stay focused on favorite tokens. Like, there was one a year and a half ago that I really liked. It was called DSLA. It's like an interoperability token. I have not kept up on it, but I'm going to start doing that kind of reading again. I am a pretty big bag holder in Cardano. which I know is a meme in and of itself. Cardano's kind of like the Oxia to a lot of people in in the crypto world, but
Yet
you know,
still exists, right? As other things are falling away, Cardano still exists as much as you want to laugh at it.
and you know, it's a slow builder. The holders are extremely dedicated. It has like at one point, I don't know if these numbers are still the same, but at one point it was like close to 80% of the tokens were staked. You know, and I think it's still pretty high. I think it's still like in the 70% range. So to me, that alone is, you know, extremely bullish. I don't know if their deliverables are ever going to meet people's expectations, at least not in this cycle. But you know, I got in cheap enough to where I don't mind letting that one play out.
Yeah.
But no, I definitely am not going to be, you know, casting 100 different fishing rods with a dead worm on it. You know, I'm going to try to send some decent bait at some proven projects from the last cycle, and then keep my eyes out for things that are absolutely ready to deliver if they haven't already started at the beginning of the next run. Like I'm not going to be investing in anything that's promising something in the future. You know, I'd rather take something that's going to trail Bitcoin and Ethereum and not, you know, go run its own race.
Is that the lesson? Is that the lesson that you have, especially from recent things that have happened, that no matter what, especially in this cycle, like, you know, BTC and ETH are kind of where the focus has to continue to go back to at this point, and therefore the closer to that, I mean,
definitely, as money leaves our market, the money stays in those, right? Money leaves like all the shit coins and goes back into people's personal bank accounts, and then when people start hearing about crypto again, they're not hearing about you know, Solana, and they're hearing about Ethereum making a move. They're hearing about Bitcoin making a move. So they always lead.
You could so easily have felt different though this past time, right? I mean, you had obviously Solana was everywhere in a huge run up, right? Matic, which, you know, I still think is obviously quite relevant. And then you go into stadiums, and I'm not just talking about like FTX Arena and all that stuff. You also had, you know, you go into Yankee Stadium and Tezos is sprinkled everywhere in the middle of center field and everywhere else. Like, you could have just so easily thought that the dynamic was totally changing at that point, only for us to come back to a place which is maybe the dynamic's still not changing.
Yeah. Those big headlines can feel like they're setting us back, but you know, I saw a super interesting graphic about November in general over the last like 8 years. It's been really interesting. It's like every other November is like at least 50% lower than the previous November. So we'll do the leg up and then we'll cut back in half at least, you know, so there's always these things. So it's always led by, you know, some probably macro conditions, but then something happens within crypto that makes headlines, you know, and you know, who knows what it's going to be after this or moving forward, but there's always going to be something because of there's decentralization, right? So there's always going to be a reason for something to fail hard and not be predicted by, you know, big banks and the governments. And then the people that want to make headlines out of that are going to make headlines out of that. And then, you know, normies are going to see all those headlines and they're going to sit on the sidelines when it's the perfect time to accumulate. And then by the time they're reading the opposite headlines where they get FOMO, it's going to be too late for them to start buying in. And guess what? The price is going to be $65,000, $85,000 for a Bitcoin and $7,000 for Ethereum. Like, the cycle is going to continue. It's just, for me, it's just better to stay in the proven ones now and then, you know, and diversify into other things that have been proven. There's no reason, because now I'll make my money from DCAing in and out and not worrying about hitting, you know, 100x, 1000x coins.
I mean, it's a lot easier to say that though now too, right? Now that it's, you know, $12, maybe goes to $600, right? It's going to be a lot to say that versus if next cycle you got in at like, you know, 3K or something like that, you might not be thinking the same thing. So it's almost like it's an excellent opportunity we have right now to be able to plan, do exactly what you're saying, and, you know, and be more methodical. Like, I feel like we're all in a very lucky place. like having been there for the last cycle and now learning a lot and taking this time, we're in a really lucky place to be able to be that much more measured next time around, and not just like this scramble where we're all kind of like learning on the spot, which I think will continue also. But we could also be like very, very plan oriented about it as well, which is pretty great. So
yeah,
cool.
It would be nice though if we had someone who could write contracts like Kfish. Like if I could take 10% of my assets and buy Bitcoin and Ethereum with them right now, put them into a contract, and have that contract execute sales, and then lock it for 6 months into fiat, into stable coins, right? It's like, hey, I'm going to buy Bitcoin right now, and then if it hits $80,000, it liquidates my Bitcoin, sells it into Tether or USDC or whatever, and then it locks it for 6 months. Like I could use a little bit of that, of those handcuffs, I think. Because,
it's market, got time, go study, man, go learn Solidity, make it happen. You got
sure. That's what my 6-year-old's for. He's the one learning how to code. I got him. He's learning Python right now. It's pretty sick.
Put them to work. Hey, who was it? Somebody else here that was saying that his kids were gaming for them, and they kind of turned that into skilled. Make it happen. It's also useful for them too.
For sure.
What cognizant of time today? Really, just awesome conversation. Just a different approach that we've taken in the past, and I want to call out appreciation for you. Sharing a lot about your background personally too, which I know is sometimes. It's an uncomfortable thing in general. It's especially uncomfortable thing within Web3 where people prefer, to stay on doc
and whatnot. Yeah.
Yeah. So really, really appreciate it, man. I think it was, great for people to be able to connect the dots in terms of, how you've learned and how you've evolved and be able to pull from those lessons. So I really appreciate you coming on. And for everybody listening live, listening afterwards, appreciate you like always. Appreciate the live questions and the feedback and all that good stuff. And we will see everyone similar time next week on Thursday. Thank you so much, everyone.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. I appreciate just as many names being here now as when I started talking.
That was awesome stuff, Seth. I really appreciate you being so transparent with everything, man. I think it provided really good context and just a overall good perspective on expectations and how to approach the space and lessons learned and the whole 9 yards. So thank you very much, man.